In this week's Technique Tuesday video, I'll demonstrate how to increase while maintaining a ribbing pattern. As always, if you'd like to jump right to a specific point in the video, there are direct links down in the description. So here is a chart of 18 stitches of knit 2, purl 2 ribbing. So the blank squares represent knits and the ones with dots represent purls, and we've got 18 stitches, and let's say we want to work some increases and we want to maintain the ribbing pattern, and we want to do it in two places. We want to kind of divide this up into thirds. We want to do increases in here and we want to do increases in here. So when you increase fabric, you end up with, of course, the fabric is wider at the top than it is at the bottom, and so the stitches are going to go outward like this. So when you start with ribbing and you're adding increases in these two central places, so we've got the center ones here, these are the center 6 rib stitches here, and then at the edge we have the 6 stitches here. So this is the area right here that's getting increased. Well, these increases can be created in two different ways. In one way, the center part can get increased and all of the new ribs can be vertical, just like the original center stitches, and only the edge stitches are angled off to the right. So here's an example of that first situation where you're maintaining the 6 stitches at the edge and all of the new stitches are being added to the center. So the chart for something like that would look like this. So as new stitches are created, they're being added to the center and they're maintaining the pattern. They're keeping the pattern relative to all the stitches in the center. They may not be in pattern every row. They're only going to be in pattern every 8th row after you've added a whole repeat of ribbing. Then the entire pattern is going to be maintained again. So while you're increasing, you're maintaining the pattern in the center, but it's off pattern for the edge. And that's going to give you this business like this. In the other situation, these center stitches stay vertical as they were, but all the new ribs are going off to the side the same way the edge stitches go. And in this case, you are maintaining the pattern relative to the stitches at the edges, and the center stitches are maintained. And notice that at this edge we started with a knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, but in the center we have purl 2, knit 2, purl 2. The stitches are coming out of those purl columns like this. It kind of looks a little bit like a Hanukkah menorah in this case. If you were to flip this over though, you can see that the stitches are coming out of purl or knit columns on this side with a column of purls up the center. So in this case you would have knit 2, purl 2, knit 2 in the center with the new stitches coming out of the knit columns, but then at the edges you'd have purl columns. So it just depends on the number of stitches you have and how you want to arrange them. If you want the new stitches to be added to the edges, but you want those new stitches to come out of knit columns and you wanted a central knit column, you could do that. In this case, I've got 10 stitches in the center and then 4 stitches that I start with at each side when I start doing the increases, and in that case I get a result like that I want. So this is what I'm going to show you today, is how to increase and maintain pattern based on whether you want the edges to be increased in size or if you want the center to be increased in size. What I'm going to do is create increases right next to these columns of knit stitches on every right side row. And because this is maintaining itself just as it is and the new stitches are being created for the edge, what we want is to have increases that lean toward the area that's changing in size. So this center area is not changing, it's staying the same. It's these stitches over here that are increasing. So we want increases that lean toward the area that's changing in size. These two symbols right here indicate yarn over increases that lean in one direction or another. And I really like this type of increase because it doesn't remove slack from the neighboring stitches the way a regular make one increase can, the kind where you lift the running thread. And it doesn't create as much slack as a twisted loop, like a backwards loop would on the needle. So it's a nice compromise between those two different kinds of increases. The other thing that I like about it is that you don't have to work it in pattern when you create it. The increases are always going to be adjacent to this column of knit stitches. Now you could put a marker on the needle between those two stitches, and then when you got to the marker you could make your increase and then slip the marker, and then come to here, slip the marker, make your increase. I don't like markers on my needles, they get in my way, so I prefer to put a marker on the fabric. So I'm putting a marker around this knit stitch here and around the knit stitch here. So that way I know that when I get to that column of stitches, I'll need to do my increase. So I'm working here, I've got knit 2, purl 2, and I'm doing knit 2, purl 2, and now I am going to work an increase. I want an increase that leans toward the area changing in size, so I want one that leans to the right. I'm going to do a reverse yarn over, which means a regular yarn over comes over the needle like this. I'm going to do it this way. And you can see how that yarn over lays on the needle so that it's angled to the right. So I want a right leaning yarn over increase here, and that's what I'm putting. So now I continue working the stitches as they present in pattern. So now I've come to this final stitch, and now it's time to create a yarn over increase that leans to the left. It leans toward the area that's changing in size. This is the area changing in size. So in this case, I do a regular yarn over. You can see that that is on the needle, lies on the needle with a left lean. It's leaning to the left. And now I work the rest of the stitches as they present. So now I'm going to work across the stitches, working the stitches as they present until I get to that yarn over. So I'm almost there. What I want to do is maintain the pattern within this area that's getting bigger. So I've got a knit stitch here, another knit stitch here. So I've worked 2 knits. That means this yarn over needs to be purled, but I want to purl it so that it twists. So in this case, because I have a regular yarn over on the needle, I need to purl through the back. So I have to point the needle at myself, get that needle through the back of the stitch, and then I can purl it. So I'm maintaining the pattern within here, and now I just keep whatever the pattern is in the center stitches. So I've got another 2 purls. Now I've got 3 purls in a row on this side of the fabric, 3 knits on that side. So now I can see this marker is coming up. I can see that this yarn over is coming up. And again, these stitches are always kept as they are. The yarn over has to be maintained in pattern relative to all of this area here. So in this case, I have to look ahead, and I see that I've got 2 knit stitches here. That means this one has to be a purl. We want to bring the yarn forward. In this case, for it to twist, I have to work through the front of the yarn over in order to make sure that it twists when I work it, because we want it to twist and close. And now we work all of these stitches as they present. So at this point I have knit 2, purl 2 all the way up to here, and then I've got 3 knits in a row. So this 3rd knit is in pattern relative to these stitches. We don't worry about it not being in pattern with whatever is in the center. Once again, we work up to this column of knits. We're always creating our increase right adjacent to here. And again, I want a right leaning yarn over. So I come from behind to get that. Once again, I need an increase. This one has to lean left. So I do a regular yarn over and then knit the stitches as they present. Again, I look for my marker so I know that this is where the change occurs, and I want to keep all of these stitches in pattern relative to each other. So that yarn over is going to be worked according to what comes after this stitch. and the yarn over here is going to be worked according to what comes before it, because we're maintaining this yarn over relative to these stitches. So I've just knit 2, I'm doing a purl, and now this yarn over has to be purled, and in order for it to twist I have to come from the back. You can see that that's going to create a twisted loop. And then I work these stitches however they present. Now I'm at this yarn over, so I have to look ahead and see how this yarn over needs to be worked in order to be maintained with the pattern of these stitches. So I've got 2 knits here, a purl here, so that one has to be purled. And this time I have to purl through the front in order for it to twist. Now we're ready to begin the 3rd increase. Once again, we're going to do a yarn over to the right, and here a yarn over to the left. This time when I get to the yarn over, I've just worked 2 purls, so now this one needs to be knit, and I knit this one through the back. So this one we look ahead, knit 2, purl 2, so this yarn over needs to be knit, and this one needs to be knit through the front. The final increase row is going to bring the total number of increases up to 4 on each side, which means we will have increased a full rib on each side. Once again, we're going to do a yarn over to the right here and a yarn over to the left over here. Yarn over right. So as I've said, this yarn over here is pointing toward the edge, it's pointing toward the left. When you're on the back side of the work, it's still pointing left, but because you're at the back side of the work, it's pointing inward. So that's something that can cause some confusion if you're not aware of that. You might think, oh, I didn't work this correctly. So I've just worked 2 purls, I'm working a knit, and that means this yarn over has to be knit, it's leaning left. Now for knit yarn overs, if it's leaning left and you're going to knit it, then the needle has to point left, which means you have to put it through the back of the stitch. For this one, it's leaning to the right and we need to knit it. So the working needle has to point through the right. The only way this will twist and make that happen is if we go through the front. And then we knit and pattern. So we wanted to maintain the center as it was, and the increased stitches were in the edge, and so those stitches are all going diagonally along with the edge here. So in this example, we want just the edge stitches to angle off, and we want all the new stitches to occur in the center, lined up with the center stitches. So in this case, we're going to be doing all of the new increases to the left of this knit column here. All the new ones are going to be in toward the center. So I'm going to put my marker around that column. And over here, they're all going to be occurring in the center to the right of this knit column. So in this case, since the new stitches are going to be in the center, this is the area that's changing in size. That means the increase needs to lean toward the center. So in this situation, we have a regular yarn over, a yarn over left here. And in this case, we put the yarn over, the right yarn over here, because that's leaning toward the area that's changing in size, which is the center. This time, we are keeping in pattern with the stitches in the center. So I look ahead and I see I have 2 knits here. That means this stitch needs to be purled. So I need to bring the yarn forward, and in order for it to twist, I need to come through the front. Another way to look at that is it's the left leg. You get a twisted stitch when you knit through the left leg, and the left leg is the leg connected to the stitch on the left. Then I knit the rest of these in pattern until I get to this yarn over, and again I'm maintaining pattern relative to what's in the center. I've just worked 2 knit stitches, so now I do a purl, and for this to twist I have to work through the back. This time the left leg is in the back. You can see if I were to just enter it here, nothing's going to be twisted. But if I enter back here, you can see that that stitch will be twisted. Now I just work the edge stitches as they present. So here we have the start of these ribs coming up the middle that are going to look just like this. So here's a sweater pattern where I used both increasing in pattern while ribbing and also decreasing. So I was keeping my stitch count the same. I was increasing on this side and decreasing on the other, and I got these diagonal ribs. Now in this case, I did something slightly different. Each time I created a new set of ribs, I was using a yarn over to the right of this column of knits right here, and then I created 4 new stitches. The next time I created them to the right of this newly created rib. So I was constantly moving where I was placing my increases because I needed to maintain this line and because I was decreasing over on the other side. So here is where the border is the repeat. I was creating a yarn over on every right side row to the right of that knit stitch. And then over on the left, I was doing a compensating decrease the first 2 times. The third time I did a double decrease, and then I didn't do a decrease at all after I did this last yarn over. So the stitch count was constantly being maintained. The reason for this double decrease was to help to produce this kind of curved look that was adjacent to the cable stitches. This video today was really just an introduction to how increases in ribbing can be used to produce different effects. I would encourage you to try out these approaches on a swatch or 2, as well as experimenting with different increases to see if you prefer the leaning yarn over increases I showed you today, or if you prefer using some other version of Make One increases. You might also experiment with combining increases and decreases in order to maintain your stitch count. If you have any comments or questions about today's video or suggestions for videos you'd like to see in the future, you can leave those down in the comments below or join the discussion in my Ravelry group, Rox Rocks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.